Okay, I'm going to do a little quick video on how to do a linked offset in Inkscape, which is a free program download for laptop and desktop. I'm using it on an LG Gram laptop. I'm actually starting out in Cricut Design Space for example um, comparison to the linked offset feature, which was recently added to Cricut. I haven't worked with it a whole lot. I have to say I'm less than impressed, partly because it's a little glitchy, but more so because I just don't love working with text in Cricut to begin with. If you have a very basic blocky text, it's generally not a problem, but I like to use a lot of script type fonts, especially the ones that are supposed to connect and be one continuous word, and those are more difficult and more time consuming in Design Space. So like I said, just for comparison's sake, we'll do a little experiment. I am going to type a little phrase, Easter blessings, and we will I'll pick one of my favorite system fonts called Back to Black. It's a nice thick script font, as you'll see. Okay, this is what I don't like about Cricut's text function. It is very, I don't know, the word is rudimentary. The fact that the letters come in all separated and you have to manually kern the letters so they connect is putsy and time consuming and less than perfect. Less than ideal in my opinion, especially when there are lots of other programs where you don't have to do that. But this is how it goes. You type your word. You can adjust the letter spacing. I'm kind of keeping an eye like right here where the A and the S come together to see when those connect roughly at the right spot. That looks pretty good to me. I might even try minus 0.5. Oops. Minus 0.5, which it doesn't even look right. Let's go back here. That was probably the closest as far as these two letters go. I'm going to make this a little bigger. That looks pretty good, but as you can see, the T is nowhere near where it's supposed to be. The E and the R are overlapping, and then each of these letters are just a little bit too far off. So already I'm annoyed, and part of that's just my impatience, but again, just knowing that there's so many other programs where you don't have to do this kind of manual lining up of the letters. But this is how you do it in Design Space. So to finish getting these lined up before we can weld, we need to tack these guys together. And then you have to be careful to not adjust it too much on the y-axis or the letters won't be correct from top to bottom. So move these two together. Let's call that good. We'll weld that one. And just to speed things along, I'm not going to mess with blessings. If I were making a project, I would probably get that more perfect, but we're going to call it good enough. And we'll just weld both of them together to make this one long word. And then we'll try the new offset feature. So first thing I noticed when I tried this out as an experiment is it takes forever to pull up. I did try it on a simple Cricut blocky type font and it was a lot quicker, but I rarely use Cricut fonts. I don't want to pay for anything, and I like to use script fonts quite a lot. So this is the alternative. We sit and wait. And here's our font. I'm not really sure what all these funky lines are. I would presume that the Cricut is going to try to cut them, which again, Inkscape is miles ahead in terms of its reliability and predictability. So I'm going to try to throttle this back and make it a little bit skinnier line. And again, we wait. I'm also looking for the B to be open, the G, the insides of the S's and the E's. When I do a shadow layer, I typically like it to be fairly thin, just enough of another color to kind of help it pop against my background. Sometimes you want a thick outline, but a lot of times I want just a very thin outline. I think that's a little bit harder to do with the Cricut program. So here's my shadow layer. Less than perfect, and it took way too long in my opinion. So I'm going to show you how to achieve a more predictable outcome with Inkscape. So here's the Inkscape icon. I already have it open, so I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to go to the text, insert text tool, which is this capital A here. I'm going to go change my font. We'll use the same font. Back to black. I'm just going to click here and I'm type the same phrase. And I will just make that a little bigger. So I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go over to this text table here, and I'm going to change the font to 144 and hit apply. Now, don't worry about the bottom of the B here, or these little tails, and the G. That will fix itself once we turn this into a cut file. So, a couple steps, quick turn this into a cut file. First, I'm going to go to my selector tool. Up in here, it's the little arrow. You can also do the shortcut key, which is F1, and select your word. I'm going to go up to path along the top here. Click that. It'll bring up this drop-down box, and you're going to pick the first one, object to path. So you're telling the computer to turn this object, or your phrase, into a path that the Cricut can cut. So now it's not quite ready for the Cricut to cut it. What you can't tell by looking at it, and this is just one of those things that you have to learn about Inkscape, is that it turned it into a cut file, but each letter right now is separate. Again, you can't tell by looking at it. It just has to be something you learn. But it's essentially grouped together, to use the Cricut terminology. So we have to go up to object along the top here, and we have to ungroup, and then this becomes very clear that they're each a separate letter, each outlined with their own selection box. So I'm going to click off of that and then select all of them again and go back up to path and select union. That is Inkscape's version of weld. So now this is something that you could save. It's an SVG. You can upload it into Design Space and you can cut it just like this. But we want to go the extra step of creating that shadow layer. And I already feel like this was so much quicker. If you noticed when I typed out the word that the letters were already connected exactly where they're supposed to be, everything's lined up along the bottom, all the proportions are right. So that to me is worth it, just to do all my designing and creating in Inkscape to begin with, and then just upload completed SVGs into Design Space. So I do that a lot. But let's do that extra step to make a shadow layer or a linked offset. So you're going to, with your word or phrase selected, you're going to go back up to path here. This time you're going to go all the way down to linked offset. Now you can see how it changed. The little handles at the corner are no longer present, but there's this one little diamond shape. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. You've got this little diamond shaped handle right here. Now the one thing I don't like is that the default is the same color. So the default for your shadow layer is going to be black, which means that when you go to kind of expand that background layer, you can't see. I'll just show you. When I go to make it thicker, you can't tell which is the font and which is the shadow layer. So I always go down here along the bottom. You've got this whole bottom edge of all these colors. This is your color palette. And you can do some editing within these colors too to make it even more custom, but we'll just pick a nice, let's see, a nice Eastery pink. So now you can see the contrast a little bit better. And we still have this little handle here, so now that you can see what you have, you can decide, oh, do I like this? Do I want to make it thinner or thicker? I'm going to make it just a little skinnier. I like to see the E's inside opened and the S's. And I'm just going to check and make sure everything looks right. I'm going to zoom out here. So the last step to actually make that shadow layer a cut file is to go back up to your selector tool. I'm going to just scooch the black layer off of here. And then I'm going to click on my linked offset layer, go back up to path, object to path. So now I have two separate SVGs that the Cricut can cut. Before I say that, what I usually will do is line them up roughly where they're supposed to be. Doesn't have to be perfect because you're still going to layer them by hand. once you cut them out of vinyl or paper. And then I'm just going to select both layers together. So you can see that there's a double outline there, so it's got both layers selected. And once they're both selected, I'm going to go up to Object and Group. And now what that does, I'm going to shrink it down a little bit too because it's pretty big right now. But what grouping it does before you save it is that it will bring it into Design Space grouped together. So you've got your two layers on top of each other. So go up here to File, Save As. I already saved it once. The default for all your files is always going to default to this Inkscape SVG. You want to just click on that and change it to plain SVG. So Easter Blessings saved as a plain SVG and save. So now we'll go test that. We'll compare it to our original test in Design Space. Find my Easter Blessings. I could do this and open that. And here's our SVG, shadow layer and regular layer. We'll upload that. And it's pretty large right now, I believe. So let's just knock that down. We'll do 12 by 2. And we'll go back up to 3 here. And we can see our two side by side. Our Cricut Design Space example and our Inkscape example. So it definitely depends on what your preference is. Some people like that thick where it fills in all the bubbles. You can do that in Inkscape too. You just pull that little diamond-shaped handle farther out so it makes a wider, thicker border. But this is kind of how I like to do my shadow layers. And especially, like I said, if you're just wanting a little secondary color to kind of pop. There you go. And you can still ungroup this within Cricut. Then you've got your two separate layers. And you can change the colors if you want. So you can do all the same kind of manipulation once you're in Design Space like you can with any SVG, but I just feel like the designing portion of it goes so much smoother in Inkscape. And the other thing that's really nice is that if you want to save the image that you just created as a PNG, you can do that through Inkscape as well. So not only did we create this nice little phrase or image or whatever you happen to have created as something that the Cricut can cut, you can also save it the way it looks on the screen right here as a PNG. So that's that portable network graphic that has a transparent background. So if you're helping someone create a logo for their business or whatnot, you can save the image as something that could be cut out of vinyl or paper. You can also save it as an image file that could be used for sublimation or printing business cards or lots of other uses. So I'll just show you that quick. All you're going to do is select your image, and if you have a multi-layer image, you want to make sure you have all layers selected that you're going to save. I usually group them together first, make it one grouped image, and then I go over here to Export As. I'm going to go up to Photos, and we'll save it as Easter Blessing. It already comes up as a PNG. We'll save that, and then I'll just show you what that looks like. Pictures, videos. Oh, I always forget this step, you guys, and this is a word to the wise. You set your credentials right here, but then you have to click the little green export check mark for it to actually save. Let's try that again. And there's our Easter Blessings. So you have this nice high quality graphic that you can use. You can overlay it on other things because it has that nice transparent background. And it will print off on a regular printer if you want to make stickers or color decals with printable heat transfer vinyl. The sky's the limit. So that's just another nice way that you can utilize images that you spend your time designing in Inkscape. So I hope you found this helpful. I will keep my eye out for other videos that I think you guys would enjoy and find useful, and let me know if there's anything specific.